Hello everyone, before I get into the main topic of the video today, I just wanted to say a big thank you to both Angus Gates and the British Modeller, who've both supported me and now supporting me over on Patreon. They've both become patrons over there. Really appreciate it, both of you. Thank you very much indeed. And I just wanted to say at the start here, the first video I've filmed since your patronage. I've filmed other videos previously and uploaded them in the intervening time, but this is the first one I've recorded after your patronage over on there. So thank you very much indeed. I wanted to say that as soon as I could. But the main topic of the video today is talking about this, the British 1939 Pattern Entrenching Tool. Now this design of entrenching tool will be very familiar to anyone who has any knowledge of sort of continental European army equipment in the early to mid 20th century. Obviously Germany, it's fairly well known that Germany obviously used a small shovel type entrenching tool like this. In fact, the DDR would carry on using an entrenching tool like this after the Second World War. It was quite a long-lived design in continental European use in armies other than Germany as well. In British service, it didn't last very long. The reason for its introduction, the two-part entrenching tool, which had been used with the 1908 pattern web equipment, was discontinued from British Army use, I believe in 1923, if I remember correctly. And basically, the British Army didn't have an entrenching tool that could be carried on the web equipment, other than shovels carried in various ad hoc manners and so on, or picks. There was no purpose-designed entrenching tool to be carried with the equipment until obviously 1937 pattern came along, and it was realised that we don't have an entrenching tool. It appears the Royal Navy continued to use the two-part entrenching tool. Certainly some of their contracted web equipment dating from the later 1920s and 1930s does include entrenching tool carriers. In fact, they made a carrier which functions in the same way as the 1937 pattern. That is to say, the helve is carried on the carrier rather than having a separate attachment next to the bayonet to carry the helve. But that's by the by. The army didn't have an entrenching tool at the beginning of the Second World War. So they took an off-the-shelf design, which is this, the short shovel. Major problem with this, of course, is it doesn't work as a pick and it doesn't work as a mattock, which the two-part entrenching tool did. And you could take the helve out and use the head of the mattock to use it as a small shovel as well. That was also a possibility. So in anything but very soft soil, these shovels are not very good. That you can't use them to hack away at hard ground in the same way. That was certainly a problem that was found. Obviously, with folding short shovels, you can generally fold the blade flat at a right angle rather than the handle to make a mattock. So the Germans obviously would introduce a folding entrenching tool of that design, as would the Americans latterly, and so on. But this, obviously, the British went with this sort of antiquated design by this point, I think it's fair to say, and it wasn't very popular. Designated 1939 pattern, it's seen as a very important bit of BEF kit. In actuality, it isn't that important to have one of these. They are nevertheless interesting. I would stress here the cover is reproduction, not original, although it is a very good reproduction. It's made from original webbing components. The reason I have the strap like this, you'll often see it looped around the sort of loop twice around or once all the way around and then buckled up. Certainly on repro carriers, the strap is long enough to do that. There's been some debate about this, and the strap on originals is not actually long enough to do this. It's often not long enough to do this. So I've just looped it around once. It's often difficult to see in photographs because depending on which side these were worn on, they were often worn on the side with the water bottle, and the water bottle would be worn over the top of them. But they were worn on either hip. Obviously, they're designed, the carrier itself, we'll just talk about briefly, is designed to hang on the brace ends, so it hangs very low on the belt. There's no belt loops on the back of the carrier, as you can see, so it doesn't hang very high on the belt. It hangs quite low below the belt, and therefore it flaps around a lot and is generally a pain. Introduced in January of 1940, though termed the 1939 pattern. Obviously, they wouldn't therefore be in France until the spring of 1940. And this is a 1940 dated example. I'll just remove it from its cover now. The problem, of course, being there that a lot of people do carry them for BEF reenacting, and it's not really necessary. There are lots of photographs showing chaps not carrying these. They do turn up in a lot of training photos later in 1940. If I hold that up to the camera there, hopefully you can see the markings on the handle there. So introduced January 1940, it would seem that they first arrived out in France with replacements being sent out from the UK who would arrive equipped with these. It's unclear if they were shipped out and issued out to men who were already out there I don't know on that front, but they do turn up in photographs to a degree. An interesting thing to have, but certainly not necessary for a BEF set of equipment. Interesting construction. You have actually two parts to this, two metal parts to this, and the wooden handle. You have the blade, the head there, and you can see that then riveted onto the wooden handle here. And then you have a second separate piece at the back, which this wraps around and is riveted here as well. You can see the back end of that rivet there, then ground relatively flush, and then that rivets onto the back of the head there to give it quite a lot of strength. It's a very sturdy design. It doesn't differ greatly from those issued to the German army around this time. They do appear, as I say, in later 1940. You certainly see them in training with the British Army post Dunkirk, but they then seem to fall out of favour quite quickly. The latest examples of this entrenching tool in use I've been able to find are with the 5th Division, embarking for Italy in 1943. By this point, I think it was a little bit of a rarity to see these, though quite a few men in the photograph are carrying them. The two-part entrenching tool, of course, had been around for a couple of years at this point, and most of the other men seen in photographs of troops embarking at this time, if they're carrying entrenching tools, are carrying the two-part entrenching tool. I believe if I remember, Khaki Webb has the order by which they were finally made obsolete, and I believe this is dated 1948. The two-part entrenching tool, of course, is then reintroduced in 1941, along with the webbing carrier, which goes on the back of the equipment in the same manner as it had done with the 1908 pattern equipment. Much better place to carry it. It does bounce around a bit, but it's not flapping around getting in the way of your leg, and it doesn't encumber you in nearly the same way as this does, with its long handle hanging relatively low below the belt. So a relatively brief video, just talking a little bit about the details of these. The salient points I would take away is you don't need one of these, but they are interesting from a reenacting point of view. From a collecting point of view, they're a very interesting thing to have. From a reenacting point of view, you certainly don't need one of these, even if you're representing the British Army in the early war era, or post-Dunkirk when they were more common. You don't need one. Not everyone wore them, and you can certainly tell that in old photographs. There are some photographs with some men wearing these, others not. Some people say, obviously, a lot of men had them, but they ditched them because they were a pain. I don't know that's necessarily true. It's not your property to ditch. If you throw it away, you're going to have to pay for it, essentially. So I think it's just a case of not many were issued out in France. And then obviously slightly more use was made of them after this point in training, for want of anything else, because there was no other standard issue entrenching tool. So that's something I would take away from this, is you don't necessarily need one of these from reenacting point of view, but it's a nice collectible to have. And obviously very short-lived, but interesting that this design, which was so synonymous with many European armies, continental European armies, did see brief service with the British Army. So that's a run over of this, just a brief run over of the 1939 pattern entrenching tool, which I thought might be of interest to people. It's certainly quite emblematic of that early war era, the British Army in that early war era. But that's everything I wanted to cover in this video. I hope you found it interesting, as I always say. As stated at the start of the video, of course, there is a Patreon if you'd like to support the channel, as many other people have done. I'm very, very grateful to everyone who has done that. Link to that in the description. There's also a PayPal link in case you want to make a one-time donation. Thank you as well to all those who've previously donated through that. If you like my videos and you'd like to see more, then of course you can subscribe to the channel and make sure you hit the little notification button down below. Notifies you when I upload future videos, of course. There's also a Facebook and an Instagram page where I upload photographs and post about upcoming reenacting events and so forth. A little bit quiet at the moment because it's the winter months now, or getting that way certainly. And I say it is a good place to keep up with what's going on though when the reenacting season is in full swing. But that's everything for this video. So until next time, bye for now.